My family disowned me years ago over false allegations made by my brother's girlfriend. Now that the truth has finally come out, they're trying to come back into my life, completely unaware of the new life and the new family I built without them. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help for a moment. We've noticed the channel has been losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, it's free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support truly means the world to us. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Alright, now let's start the video. Alright, Reddit. This story is gonna mess with your head. I'm talking about the kind of betrayal that makes you question everything you thought you knew about family, about loyalty. This happened about 8 years ago, but I'm finally ready to put it all out there. Because honestly, keeping this to myself has been eating me alive. So, picture this. I'm 32 now, but back then, I was 24 years old. I was living at home, finishing my engineering degree, and working part-time at a local garage. My younger brother, Kai, was 22. He had been dating this girl, Anita, for about a year and a half. She was one of those girls who seemed perfect on paper, pretty smart, came from a good family. My parents absolutely loved her. They were always talking about how lucky Kai was, how she was perfect daughter-in-law material. I never really liked her, though. Something about her always felt fake to me. She'd be all sweet and innocent around my parents, but I caught her being pretty nasty to service workers when she thought nobody was looking. And then there were the comments. Little comments about me. They sounded like jokes, but they weren't really jokes, you know? She'd say things like, "Oh, still living at home? When are you going to get your life together? Like Kai?" She always said it with a smile, one that never quite reached her eyes. Kai, though, he was completely whipped. This dude would cancel plans with friends, skip family events, basically reorganize his entire life around whatever Anita wanted. It was painful to watch, but he was my brother. I figured he'd eventually figure it out on his own. I was wrong. The day everything went to hell started normal enough. I was supposed to help Kai move some furniture from his apartment to his new place. We had planned to meet around 3 p.m. to get started. But around 1:30 he texted me. He said his car was making weird noises and he needed to stop by the shop to get it looked at. He told me he might be an hour late, but Anita would be there to let me in, and we could start packing some of the smaller stuff. No big deal, right? I figured I'd grab some coffee on the way and maybe get a head start on boxing up his books or whatever. Kai had given me his spare key months earlier when he first moved in, so I didn't think twice about it. I got to his apartment building around 1:45 and took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet. Most people were probably at work on a Tuesday afternoon. I walked up to Kai's door and was about to knock when I heard voices inside. I figured Anita was maybe on the phone or watching TV. I used my key to unlock the door and stepped inside, calling out, "Hey, it's me," so I wouldn't startle her. And that's when I saw them. Anita was pressed up against the wall in Kai's living room, with Alan's hands all over her. They were making out like teenagers, completely lost in each other. Alan, my brother's friend since college. The guy who had been to every birthday party, every family barbecue, for the past 3 years. "What the hell?" I shouted. They broke apart instantly. Anita's face went from passion to pure panic in about half a second. Alan spun around and went white as a sheet when he saw me standing there. For a moment, nobody said anything. I was furious. "Are you kidding me right now?" I said, looking back and forth between them. "In my brother's own apartment?" For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Anita started crying. She pushed Alan away and backed toward the corner of the room, sobbing, saying, "Please don't tell him. Please don't tell him," over and over. Alan stepped between us with this weird, protective stance. "Dude, you need to leave," he said. "Just go." Like I was the one who didn't belong there. "Kai is my brother," I said. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Alan?" That's when Anita really started freaking out. She was hyperventilating, saying things like, "He's going to tell everyone. Kai will never forgive me." I tried to calm her down, but she just kept getting more hysterical. Alan kept telling me to leave. Finally, I said, "Screw it," and walked out. I figured I would call Kai and let him handle it. I drove home thinking about how I was going to break this news to my brother. Heavy. It was going to destroy him, but he needed to know. Firm. The guy deserved better than being played for a fool by someone he trusted. Beat. But near the evening, my phone started blowing up with calls from Kai. Shift. When I answered, he was screaming at me. Shock. "What the hell did you do to Anita?" Raised voice. The conversation with Kai was like something out of a nightmare. He was so angry I could barely understand what he was saying at first. Confused. Apparently, Anita had called him immediately after I left, crying and telling him that I had attacked her at his place. Her story was that she was alone when I had shown up and, while helping with the furniture, I forced myself on her. Disbelief. Alan was backing up her story, claiming he walked into us and tried to stop me, but I was too strong and that I had threatened both of them. Stunned silence. I could not believe what I was hearing. Sharp. Kai, that is completely insane. I caught them making out. Clear. She is cheating on you with Alan. Shut up, you are a liar, he said. Cold. Anita would never cheat on me. She loves me. You are just jealous because you cannot get a girl like her. Hit. The jealousy angle hit me hard because it was so ridiculous. Controlled. I had never been jealous of Kai's relationship. Reflective, if anything, I had felt bad for him because I could see how manipulative she was. Measured. I tried to explain what I had actually seen, but Kai was not having it. Wall, he said Anita was talking to the police. Echo, the police. Hollow pause. I felt like I was in some alternate reality where nothing made sense. Pleading. Kai, please, you have to listen to me. Breaking. I am your brother. Why would I lie about this? Snap. Because you have always hated her, he said. Accusatory. You have never been able to stand seeing me happy. Final blow. Well, congratulations. You might have just destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. Click. He hung up on me. Silence. I sat there, hands shaking, trying to figure out what just happened. Slow breath. 20 minutes ago, I was worried about telling my brother his girlfriend was cheating. Turn now, apparently I was a predator. Wait. I drove to my parents' house, went inside and found them in the kitchen. They already knew. Sink. Kai had called them first, and they were both sitting there, looking at me like I was a stranger. Ache. My mom was crying, and my dad was just staring at me with this expression I had never seen before. Low. Is true? My dad asked. Quiet. Is what true? That I caught Anita cheating and she is lying to cover her tracks. Firm. Yeah, that is true. Gasp. My mom gasped like I had just confessed to murder. How could you do this to your brother? Hurt to that sweet girl. I tried to explain what really happened, but they were not listening any better than Kai had. Door shut, they had already decided I was guilty. Choice. They would rather believe their son was capable of assault than admit their perfect future daughter-in-law was a cheater. Surreal, the next few hours were surreal. Entrance, Kai came home with Anita. Performance. She was playing the victim perfectly, crying whenever anyone looked at her, flinching when I entered the room. Observing. She had clearly studied how trauma victims behave and was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. Avoidance. Kai would not even look at me. Boundary. When I tried to talk to him, he told me to stay away from his girlfriend. Sting. My own brother was treating me like a predator in our own house. Crack. The worst part was watching my parents comfort Anita. Detail. My mom was making her tea and telling her how brave she was. Contrast. My dad was patting Kai on the back and telling him what a good man he was for standing by his woman. Alone. Meanwhile, I was sitting right there, their actual son, and they were treating me like a monster. Empty. Nobody was asking me for my side of the story. Void. Nobody seemed to care that their son and brother might be innocent. Finality. They had already made up their minds. Night. That night, Kai cornered me in the hallway outside my room. Threat. He was different than I had ever seen him, angry in a way that was almost scary. Warning. If you ever go near Anita again, I will beat the hell out of you myself, he said. Memory, the little brother I taught to throw a football, was talking to me like I was his worst enemy. Swear. Kai, she is lying. Pleading. I swear to God she is lying. Truth. I caught her cheating and she is covering it up. Violence. He grabbed me by the shirt and slammed me against the wall. Fear. My little brother was looking at me like he wanted to kill me. Disgust. You are going to keep lying even now? He said. Even after what you did to her. Final. You are sick, man. Echo. You are really sick. Push. I pushed him off me. Resigned. Fine, do not believe me. Line. But when you find out the truth, do not come crying to me. Cold. The only truth is that my brother is a monster, he said, and I am never going to forgive you for this. Cut. 2 days later, the police showed up at our house with a warrant for my arrest. Expected, I knew it was coming. Fact, Anita had filed a formal complaint, and Alan was corroborating her story. Humiliation. But actually being handcuffed in front of my neighbors was humiliating beyond words. Interrogation. The detective handling my case was this older guy who clearly thought I was guilty from the start. Pressure. During the interrogation, he kept asking me things like, "Did you plan this, or was it a crime of passion?" As if he was just trying to get me to confess to something I did not do. Weariness. He had this tired, seen-it-all attitude that told me he had heard every excuse in the book and was not buying mine. Truth. I told him the truth, that I had caught Anita cheating and she was lying to cover it up. Dismissal. But he said that is what guys like me always say. Wait. Apparently, claiming the victim was lying was such a common defense that it actually made me look more guilty. Doubt. My parents kept asking me if I was sure that is what happened. Like maybe I was confused or afraid to tell the truth. Alone. The only person who believed me was my friend Jensen, who said he had known Anita was sketchy from day one. Time. The investigation dragged on for 6 weeks. Hold. 6 weeks of my life just suspended while the police interviewed witnesses and collected evidence. Home. The house was like a war zone. Constant. Kai and Anita were there constantly, and she was milking the victim role for everything it was worth. Display. She would have panic attacks whenever I was in the room and would cry to my parents about how traumatized she was. Mask. The performance never stopped, even when she thought no one was watching. Guard. Kai was her loyal guard dog through all of it. Glare. He would sit with her during her episodes and glare at me like I was some kind of animal that needed to be contained. Belief. My parents were completely buying into it too. Comfort. They would comfort Anita and tell her how sorry they were that their son had done this to her. Ghost. I felt like a ghost haunting my own house. Silence. The worst part was that nobody wanted to hear my side of the story. Shutdown. Whenever I tried to explain what really happened, they would shut me down and say I was re-traumatizing the victim. Verdict. I was guilty until proven innocent, and maybe not even then. Loss. My college suspended me pending the outcome of the investigation. Fall. My job fired me for conduct unbecoming. Distance. Friends stopped calling and returning texts. Town. Word got around our small town pretty quickly, and I could not go anywhere without people staring and whispering. Anchor. Jensen was the only one who stuck by me. Awkward. He would come over and hang out, which was awkward because Kai would leave the room whenever Jensen showed up. Faith. Jensen kept saying he knew I was innocent and that the truth would come out eventually. Doubt. Sometimes I wondered if he was just being loyal or if he actually believed me, but his support was the only thing keeping me sane. Turn. After about a month, the detective called me in for another interview. Shift. He said they had been investigating Alan's story and found some inconsistencies. Apparently, Alan had already changed his story twice about what exactly he had seen. His timeline didn't match Anita's at all. And when you're lying, it's hard to keep all the details straight, especially under police scrutiny. The detective told me they had also requested Anita's phone records and found some interesting text messages. He wouldn't tell me what they said, but his attitude toward me had definitely changed. He started asking different questions. Questions like whether I had any proof of the affair I claimed to have discovered. Now, for my absolute shitty luck, there were no security cameras around Kai's place. I had no proof. Nothing except what I had seen with my own eyes. And apparently, that wasn't enough. 2 weeks later, the charges were dropped. The detective called to tell me they had found no evidence to support Anita's claims, and several pieces of evidence that directly contradicted her story. He said they wouldn't be pursuing the case any further. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was mixed with anger, because it had taken 6 weeks to reach what felt like an obvious conclusion. You'd think that would be the end of it. You'd be wrong. My parents' reaction to the charges being dropped was basically, well, just because they can't prove it doesn't mean it didn't happen. They said they were disappointed in the justice system. Said they knew what they believed. It felt like they were more invested in being right than in their son being innocent. Kai was even worse. He said dropping the charges didn't prove anything. The mental gymnastics were incredible. Rather than admit they'd been wrong, they doubled down on their belief that I was guilty. But the worst part, they all stayed loyal to Anita, even after the charges were dropped. Even after it was clear her story didn't hold up. My family chose to believe her over me. She was still coming to family dinners. Kai was still treating her like his princess. My parents were still treating her like their future daughter-in-law. And I was the one who was unwelcome in my own house. My parents said I could stay until I figured things out, but it was clear they wanted me gone. Kai made it obvious he couldn't stand being in the same room as me. The house that had been my home for 24 years suddenly felt hostile, foreign. The final straw came about 2 weeks after the charges were dropped. I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. They were saying they were concerned about having me around, and that they needed to think about Anita's comfort. They were literally choosing my brother's lying girlfriend over their own son. The conversation was brutal. They were discussing whether to ask me to move out permanently, because my presence was upsetting to Anita. That night, I packed everything I owned into my car. I left a note saying I was leaving town, and not to look for me. I drove straight to Jensen's place and told him I was done. Done with my family. Done with that town. Done with trying to prove my innocence to people who had already decided I was guilty. Jensen tried to talk me out of it. Said I should stay and fight. But I was finished fighting. Sometimes you have to know when to walk away. Even when walking away means losing everything you thought mattered. I knew that even if I fought back, the damage was already done. I had no evidence. No place with my family anymore. So I headed north with no real plan. Just the need to get as far away as possible. I ended up in Montreal. It was the first major city I hit after crossing the border. And honestly, the distance felt right. I figured if I was going to disappear, I might as well do it properly. The French signs, the different money, felt like a completely different world. Exactly what I needed. The first few months were rough as hell. I lived in a tiny studio apartment in a sketchy part of town. I worked construction jobs that paid cash under the table. My French was garbage, so I mostly worked with other English speakers who were just as desperate for work as I was. That construction crew became a kind of temporary family. Guys who didn't ask questions about your past. Who judged you only on whether you showed up on time and could swing a hammer. The hardest part was the isolation. For the first time in my life, I had no one, no family, no childhood friends, no connections at all. Just me. In a foreign country trying to rebuild my entire existence from scratch. Some nights, I'd sit in that tiny apartment eating ramen, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The work was brutal, but it was also therapeutic. There's something about building things with your hands that clears your head when everything else is falling apart. I specialized in framing and drywall work. It required focus, precision. The physical exhaustion helped me sleep. And seeing a building come together piece by piece gave me something to be proud of. When everything else felt hopeless. After about 6 months, I changed my name legally. It cost me almost everything I had saved, but I needed to shed that old identity completely. Every time I saw my old name on documents, it dragged everything back. The new name felt like putting on clean clothes after being covered in mud. Jensen stayed in touch. Honestly, that probably saved my sanity. He called every couple of weeks. Eventually started visiting me a few times a year. It helped having one person from my old life who still believed in me. He updated me on what was happening back home, though most of it I didn't want to hear. Hearing about my family's life continuing without me felt like picking at a scab that wouldn't heal. Apparently, Kai and Anita got more serious after I left. He proposed to her with some elaborate setup in the park where they'd had their first date. My parents were thrilled, always talking about wedding plans and grandchildren. Kai got a promotion. They settled into domestic life together. From the outside, it looked like a perfect happy ending. Except for the son and brother they'd thrown away to make it happen. Jensen never said it outright, but I could tell he thought my family was messed up for choosing Anita over me. He made small comments about how strange it was that they never asked about me or seemed concerned about where I'd gone. But he was loyal to me, not them. He mentioned that some mutual friends had started asking questions about my disappearance. Kai and my parents just told them I'd moved away for work. After about a year, I started getting my life together for real. I enrolled in a college program to finish my engineering degree using my new identity and Canadian residency status. The transition back to academic life was jarring after months of physical labor, but it felt good to use my brain again. I made a few friends. Nothing deep, just people to grab a drink with or watch hockey games. Work improved too. I landed a job with a construction company that specialized in commercial buildings. The pay was decent. The work was satisfying. I started dating again around year 2, though trust was still a major issue. But slowly, gradually, I opened up. I had a routine, a decent apartment, a job I didn't hate, a few people who knew me as just a regular guy. That helped restore my confidence. The real breakthrough came in year 3, when I met April. We met at a coffee shop near campus. She was a nursing student from Vancouver, and we hit it off immediately. She was patient with my trust issues, never pushed when I was clearly uncomfortable. We took things incredibly slow. I told her I had a complicated past, but didn't go into details. She didn't push for more, and that made me trust her even more. By the time I told her the whole story, we'd been together almost a year. She already knew me well enough to know I wasn't capable of what I'd been accused of. April changed everything. She helped me remember who I was before everything got destroyed. Her family was completely different from mine. She grew up in a stable household where parents actually communicated, worked through problems, instead of choosing sides. When she talked about her childhood, it sounded like stories from another planet. Once I opened up, things got serious fast. She was the first person besides Jensen to hear the entire story, and immediately said, "That's completely insane that your family believed her over you." Having someone validate that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting, that I wasn't being dramatic was huge for my mental health. When April brought me home to Vancouver to meet her family, they welcomed me like I'd always been part of it. Her dad taught me to fish on the Fraser River. Her mom shared family recipes passed down for generations. And nobody questioned my past. Nobody made me feel like I had to prove myself. They just accepted that I was important to April. And that was enough for them. April's parents had been married for 30 years, and they still acted like they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Watching them together was strange in the best way. Felt stable, real. After about 2 years together, April got pregnant. Twins. It was terrifying and amazing at the same time. We were having a boy and a girl. I remember thinking very clearly that these kids would never know the pain of being abandoned by their family. When the kids were born, everything clicked into place. Holding my son and daughter for the first time, I knew I would literally die before letting anyone hurt them the way I had been hurt. These kids were going to grow up knowing their father would always believe them, always support them, always be on their side. The kids are 4 now, and they are everything to me. April's family stepped up in ways that completely blew my mind. Her parents moved to Montreal to be closer to the grandkids, taking early retirement just to help us with childcare. Her dad helped me buy a house in a good neighborhood with decent schools, co-signing the mortgage when my credit history wasn't quite strong enough. Her mom basically moved in for the first month after the twins were born. She did laundry, cooked meals, taught April and me how to handle two babies at once. I got promoted to project manager at the construction company, which came with better pay and more flexible hours. The promotion meant I could spend more time with the kids while still advancing my career. April finished her nursing degree and got a job at the children's hospital. It was perfect. She could actually relate to what the families were going through. We were genuinely living a dream. Good jobs, nice house, healthy kids, a supportive extended family. The kids grew up thinking they had one set of grandparents, and that was normal. I told April's parents the truth about my family, and they made it very clear that as far as they were concerned, I was their son now. They took their grandparent duties seriously. They showed up for every birthday party, every school play, every soccer game. My kids called them grandma and grandpa and got spoiled rotten, just like any other grandchildren. Jensen kept visiting, usually twice a year, and became like an uncle to the kids. They loved him. He loved being able to spoil them and then hand them back when they got cranky. He still updated me on what was happening back home, though by then, I mostly didn't want to know. Kai and Anita had gotten married in a big, expensive wedding that my parents had apparently paid for. They bought a house 3 streets over from where we grew up, close enough that Anita could continue her perfect daughter-in-law act. Kai was working at the same engineering firm where my dad had worked before retiring. It was like they were living the life I was supposed to have, with the woman who had destroyed my chance at having it. Jensen said my parents still never mentioned me, never asked how I was doing. It was like I had never existed. They had created an alternate reality where their son was Kai, their daughter-in-law was Anita, and I had simply been erased from family history. Honestly, by that point it didn't hurt the way it used to. I had a family that actually cared about me. Kids who thought I was a hero because I could fix broken toys and make pancakes on Saturday mornings. A life built on truth, instead of lies. 8 years after everything fell apart, and 5 years of peaceful family life with April and the twins, the universe decided to test me again. It was a Saturday morning. I was helping my son with his math homework while April and our daughter were at the grocery store. Just a normal weekend morning. The doorbell rang. I figured it was probably a neighbor or a delivery guy. My son ran to answer it before I could stop him. I heard him talking to someone, but I couldn't make out what was being said. Then he came running back, looking confused. Dad, there's an old man at the door who says he's your father. My stomach dropped. I walked to the front door, and there he was, my father, standing on my porch in Canada. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. He was wearing an expensive-looking winter coat, but it hung loose on his frame, like he'd lost weight recently. For a moment, I honestly thought I was hallucinating. This man, who had disowned me 8 years ago, was standing at my door like something out of a nightmare. "Hello, son," he said quietly. His voice was the same, but something in it was broken. I slammed the door so hard the whole frame shook. All those old feelings came flooding back. Betrayal, anger, pain, like it had all happened yesterday. My hands were shaking. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. My dad kept knocking, calling my name, my old name, which sounded foreign after all these years. "Please, son," he said, "open the door. Let me talk to you. I know you're angry, but please let me explain." The desperation in his voice was something I had never heard before. Then April got home with our daughter. She asked who the man at the door was. I explained everything as simply as I could. She'd heard the whole story before, obviously, but she never expected to actually meet any of my family. She was furious on my behalf, but she told me to take my time and see what he wanted. She took the kids to their rooms and gave me space to deal with whatever this was. I opened the door and let my father in. He looked around the house, took in the family photos on the walls, the kids' artwork on the refrigerator, the obvious signs of a happy family life, years of memories that he had never been part of. "You've done well for yourself," he said. There was genuine admiration in his voice. No thanks to you, I replied. What do you want? He sat down heavily on my couch and suddenly looked every one of his 73 years. His hair was completely gray now, deep lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. I need to tell you something, he said. Something we discovered last month. What he told me next was both vindicating and infuriating. Apparently, Kai and Anita's marriage wasn't the fairy tale everyone thought it was. About 6 months earlier, Kai had started noticing strange behavior from Anita, being secretive with her phone, making excuses to go out alone, staying late at work for projects that never seemed to exist. Before confronting her, Kai decided to do some detective work. One evening, when she said she was going to her book club, he followed her. He saw her car parked outside a restaurant downtown. He waited in his car for 3 hours, until she came out with Alan. He didn't confront them right away. Instead, he started paying attention to everything. Her schedule, her excuses, her behavior when she thought he wasn't watching. He documented the affair. He followed them for weeks, took photos, videos. Turns out, she was still having an affair with Alan. And Alan was now married, with kids of his own. They were meeting at hotels, at Alan's office after hours. The affair had never ended. They'd just gotten better at hiding it. And here's the part that made my blood boil. They'd been carrying on this affair for years. Not months. Years. It had been going on before I caught them, and continued through their entire marriage. Kai found credit card records showing regular hotel visits throughout their marriage. Evidence they'd been meeting even before the wedding. She'd been living a double life for basically their entire relationship. He also found text messages between them. Those messages were devastating. They talked about leaving their spouses, planning a future together, even discussing what they'd do if anyone ever found out about their history. And then, the kicker. During their marriage, Alan got her pregnant. She had an abortion without telling Kai. She was terrified the baby might not be his. The messages showed them laughing about how clueless Kai was, how easy it had been to fool everyone. Anita was also terrified that the family would find out the truth about everything they'd done. She was paranoid that I'd somehow prove my innocence and expose their lies. They even discussed what they'd do if I ever came back and tried to tell people what really happened. When Kai finally confronted her with all the evidence, she broke down. She confessed to everything. She admitted she and Alan had been involved before Kai, that they'd never really stopped seeing each other, and that when I caught them that day years ago, she panicked and made up the assault story to cover her tracks. She admitted to lying about everything. She married Kai while still in love with Alan. She let my family destroy me to protect her secret. She planned to leave Kai for Alan as soon as Alan's divorce was finalized, so they could be together openly. My father discovered all of this when Kai came to him for advice about the divorce. He was completely shattered, asking how he could have been so blind, how he could have wasted years of his life on someone who never loved him, how he had destroyed his relationship with his brother for a woman who had been lying from the very beginning. My father told me Kai was beside himself, that he knew he'd destroyed his relationship with his brother for a cheater, that he wanted to call me to apologize, but didn't even know how to find me. He'd been asking everyone where I went, but I'd disappeared completely. I sat there trying to process it all, because it was 8 years too late. My family finally knew the truth, 8 years after they'd thrown me away like garbage. And even though they finally realized I'd been telling the truth all along, the vindication felt hollow. So I asked my father what his excuse was for believing her over his own son. He looked down at his hands, tears forming in his eyes. He said he didn't have one, that they were wrong, completely, utterly wrong, that they let that girl manipulate them into destroying their own family, and had spent years living with the consequences. I asked if they really had, because from what Jensen told me, they all seemed pretty happy with their choice, with their perfect daughter-in-law, fairy tale wedding, happy family, how they erased me from the picture, and moved on like I never existed. He admitted they tried to, but not a day. He went on about how it had never been that he didn't think about me, or wonder where I was, or whether I was okay, or if I would ever forgive them. He told me my mother had never been the same, that she'd been on antidepressants for years, that she cried every Christmas, every birthday, because her son wasn't there, that she kept my old room exactly the same, untouched, like she was still waiting for me to come home. And that's when I stopped him. I told him her son was there. They just chose to believe I was a predator, instead of listening to me. We talked for almost 2 hours. He told me how Kai's entire world had fallen apart when he learned the truth. How my mother was devastated when she finally realized what they had done to an innocent son. How all of them had been trying to figure out how to find me, how to make amends. He admitted they had even hired a private investigator, who eventually tracked me down in Montreal. Then it was my turn. I told him about my life, about my wife, my kids, my career, about my in-laws, who treated me like family from day one. I showed him pictures of his grandchildren, the grandchildren he would never meet. I told him about the traditions we created, the holidays, the routines, the life I built from nothing. I explained how April's parents stepped into the grandparent role without hesitation, and how my kids never knew they were missing anything. They were loved, completely. When he said he wanted to make it right, that maybe there was a way forward, that maybe we could be a family again, I told him there was no way forward. I told him he made his choice 8 years ago, when he believed a liar over his own son, and threw me away like I was nothing. And now he wanted forgiveness, because the truth had finally come out. So I told him about the years of therapy, the trust issues, the complete destruction of my faith in family loyalty. I told him how I built a new life with people who actually cared about me, and how his sudden appearance had disrupted the peace I worked so hard to achieve. I told him about the nightmares, the ones where I woke up wondering if maybe I really was the monster they thought I was. He apologized, through tears. He said they were terrible parents, that I deserved better. I told him his apology was too late, that I had a family now, one that chose me every single day, one that believed in me, one that would never throw me away for someone else's lies. I told him he could take his guilt and his apologies back to whatever was left of the family he chose to protect. Then I walked him to the door. I told him not to contact me again. As he left, he handed me a piece of paper. Kai's phone number. He said Kai wanted to apologize too, and hoped we could reconnect. I didn't even look at it. I threw it straight into the trash, and made sure he saw me do it. After he left, I sat down on the couch, and cried for the first time in years. Not out of sadness, but because I was finally free. The truth was out. My family knew they were wrong, and I didn't care anymore, because everything I needed was already in that house with my wife, my kids, and the family who chose me. Later, April came downstairs after putting the kids to bed. She held my hand and asked if I was okay, how I felt. I told her I could finally close that chapter, that they knew the truth, and it changed nothing, that this was my family, and it was enough. Later that night, Jensen called to check on me. He told me our father had contacted him for my address, and that he'd debated warning me. When I told him everything that was said, he laughed. He said it took them long enough, and too bad they lost me in the process. I told him it was their loss, and for the first time in 7 years, I meant it. To everyone asking if I'll reconnect with Kai, the answer is no. He had 8 years to question the story. Instead, he married Anita and lived happily, while I rebuilt my life from nothing. Some bridges burn completely, and that's okay. As for my kids, they know I'm from the States, and that I have family there I don't talk to. When they're older, I'll tell them everything. But right now, they're just happy kids, with parents who love them, and grandparents who spoil them rotten. And that's exactly how I want it to stay.